For most of my life, I believed that an apology was something that only needed to be given when I had done something clearly wrong. It was a simple formula in my mind. If I made a mistake, I would apologize. If I hurt someone, I would apologize. But it wasn't until I was 24 that I began to understand that apologies were not just about acknowledging wrongdoings. They were about owning my actions, understanding my impact, and creating space for healing, both for the other person and for myself. It wasn't that I never apologized before. I did, when I felt I was in the wrong. But as I grew older, I began to notice that my apologies often felt surface level, quick, and without much depth. I was apologizing because I knew it was the right thing to do. I was saying the words, but I wasn't always truly reflecting on why I was apologizing or what it meant. It wasn't until a particular incident happened in my life that I truly learned the power of a sincere apology. It started with a conversation with a friend of mine, someone I had known for years. We had always gotten along well, but recently our relationship had started to feel strained. There were little moments of tension, subtle misunderstandings, and passive-aggressive comments that I brushed off at the time, thinking it was nothing. We were both busy, so I chalked it up to just life happening. But deep down, I knew something wasn't quite right. I could feel the distance growing between us, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly when it started. Then, one day, it all came to a head. We had a disagreement about something minor, but it escalated quickly. Words were exchanged, and I said things in the heat of the moment that I didn't mean. I was angry and defensive, and instead of taking a step back, I let the frustration spill out. I saw the hurt in my friend's eyes immediately, and my stomach sank. I knew I had crossed a line, but I couldn't bring myself to apologize right away. I was too proud. I was embarrassed. I didn't want to admit that I had made a mistake. The days that followed were filled with tension. I avoided reaching out, unsure of how to fix what had happened. The silence between us felt heavier than anything. I realized that the reason I hadn't apologized wasn't because I didn't think I was wrong, but because I didn't want to admit to myself how deeply I had hurt my friend. I didn't want to face the discomfort of owning up to the words I had spoken, the ways in which I had let my emotions control me, and the damage that had been done. Finally, after a few days of agonizing over it, I couldn't keep avoiding the issue anymore. I realized that this wasn't about being right. It wasn't about defending my actions or justifying the way I had acted. It was about acknowledging my role in the situation and offering something more meaningful than just an apology. It was about making it clear that I understood the impact of my words and that I valued the relationship enough to own my mistakes. So I reached out to my friend, but this time my apology was different. I wasn't just saying the words because I had to. I wasn't saying it to get out of an uncomfortable situation. I was truly reflecting on what had happened, how I had acted, and how it had affected my friend. I apologized for my harsh words, for letting frustration get the best of me, and for not being the friend that I should have been in that moment. I owned the fact that I had let my emotions cloud my judgment, and I acknowledged the hurt I had caused. I remember sitting there waiting for my friend's response, feeling vulnerable and exposed. But when my friend replied, I was surprised at how much that simple apology had meant. They told me that hearing me take responsibility for my actions, without making excuses, made all the difference. It opened the door for us to have an honest conversation about how we had both been feeling and why things had become strained. And in that moment, I realized how much power an apology truly held. It wasn't just about saying, "I'm sorry." It was about creating space for healing, for growth, and for deeper connection. From that experience, I learned that an apology is more than just words. It's an act of vulnerability, an acknowledgement of the impact of our actions, and a willingness to make things right. I learned that apologies are not just for the other person, they are also for ourselves. They allow us to reflect, to own our mistakes, and to move forward with a sense of integrity. I had spent so much time trying to be perfect, trying to avoid confrontation or discomfort, that I had forgotten how essential it was to face my mistakes head-on and take responsibility for them. It wasn't just that I had apologized, it was that I had learned to apologize with sincerity, with reflection, and with genuine remorse. I realized that an apology doesn't diminish you, it strengthens you. It shows humility and courage. It creates space for vulnerability. It builds trust and deepens relationships. As I continued to reflect on that moment and the lessons I had learned, I began to see how this approach to apology could transform not just my relationships with others, but also my relationship with myself. I had spent so many years being afraid of failure, of making mistakes, of showing weakness. But I began to understand that apologizing didn't mean I was weak. It meant I was human. And in acknowledging my humanity, I allowed myself to grow. I started to recognize the areas of my life where I had been avoiding difficult conversations or failing to own up to my mistakes. I realized that I had been so focused on protecting my image or avoiding discomfort that I had missed out on the opportunity to strengthen my relationships through honest communication. Apologies weren't about admitting defeat, they were about moving forward, together. This wasn't an easy lesson to learn, and I still struggle with it from time to time, but I now understand that the strength to apologize isn't about being perfect. It's about being open, vulnerable, and honest. It's about showing up for others and for ourselves, and understanding that growth comes from owning our actions, learning from them, and taking the steps to make things right. Apologizing has become a practice for me, a reminder that my relationships are more important than my pride, and that being honest with others, especially when it's uncomfortable, is the key to truly connecting. I learned that true growth comes not just from achieving success, but from acknowledging where we've fallen short and using those moments to build something stronger and more authentic. What I didn't realize at the time was that by learning to apologize, truly apologize, I was also learning how to forgive myself. I was learning to be kind to myself in the moments where I felt I had failed. I was learning to accept that I was human, that I made mistakes, and that it was okay. And in that acceptance, I found peace.